And in a short time, the politician and his aide are in her will. What happened after that was more than enough for Bush to investigate. Matt Mahar with the story.
Could I please talk to you for a minute? We've been trying to reach you for about 3 days.
This man who doesn't want to talk to us is Michael Muse. He's a prominent, politically connected lawyer in Boston.
We'd just like to ask you a few questions about the matter of ethics and how you handled this whole thing. Can you discuss this with us?
Right now, it appears Muse doesn't want to talk to many people. That's because there's a lot of questions being asked about how he and his good friend, Massachusetts State Representative Kevin Fitzgerald, treated a 69-year-old bag lady. A bag lady who just happened to have a $500,000 estate.
You should have seen her. She had a big overcoat on. This is in the summer. And she had boots on and I don't know how many pairs of socks.
Mary Guzelian's former in-laws couldn't believe what had happened to her. Mary used to be impeccably dressed and had closets full of hats and shoes. But after her marriage ended in divorce, and years later her mother died, Mary Guzelian became a bag lady. She ate at homeless shelters and slept on benches. She became a fixture, begging outside gay bars in Boston's Back Bay. Friends say she took in between $300 to $500 a night.
Well, we used to give Mary $1 for luck, usually at the beginning of the night. That was the model for Mary, $1 for luck.
10 years ago, State Representative Kevin Fitzgerald and his aide, Patricia McDermott, say Mary asked them to help her with a housing problem. About 6 months later, they discovered that although Mary slept on the street and at the airport, she had an apartment. And in that apartment, they found 11 trash bags. 11 trash bags filled with cash. Fitzgerald sent Mary to his lawyer friend, Michael Muse, supposedly for help with a housing problem. But 8 days later, McDermott filed for it and was appointed conservator of Mary's care. And 8 days after that, Muse had drafted a will that made State Representative Kevin Fitzgerald and his aide, Patricia McDermott, the sole beneficiaries. Some of the money was apparently used to buy Mary this condominium, and Fitzgerald and McDermott say they spent hundreds of hours taking care of her. But Mary continued to live on the street, and to others who knew her at the time, Mary was seriously mentally and physically ill.
Her skull was actually growing larger. Her hat size was increasing. Her eyesight was diminishing. Her bones were crushing in on her nerves. It must have been so painful. She complained of the pain.
Elaine Swift and her husband, Ken, met Mary on the subway when they were struggling graduate students at Harvard. They say they gave her money, bought her clothes, helped her with her hygiene, and had her to dinner 3 times a week. They had no idea she had hundreds of thousands of dollars, and were even more shocked to find out there was a court-appointed conservator who was supposed to be taking care of Mary.
Patricia McDermott, if she had spent 5 minutes with Mary once a month, once every 2 months, would have recognized a woman who needed coats and shoes.
In 1985, Mary, a habitual jaywalker, was hit by a cab. She died shortly after. Representative Fitzgerald, who says he had no idea he was named in Mary's will, and his aide, Patricia McDermott, split Mary's $500,000 estate. Lawyer Michael Muse collected tens of thousands of dollars in fees. Muse sold the condominium that had been bought with Mary's money to a company owned by his family.
Can I leave you with a card in case you give us a call later, sir?
As we told you before, attorney Michael Muse won't discuss the matter, and he refuses to release the medical records that might help to prove if Mary was of sound mind at the time she signed the will. But Representative Fitzgerald claims she was, based on 2 physical exams in 1981. Elaine Swift strongly doubts that Mary was of sound mind.
Within 30 seconds of meeting Mary, I think you would know that she had some mental problems.
Mary's conservator, Patricia McDermott, several months ago told a Boston newspaper that she had a close relationship with Mary and she was helping Mary get her life organized. McDermott wouldn't return our phone calls, nor would her boss, Kevin Fitzgerald, a leader of the Massachusetts House. So we decided to go see him.
Is Kevin in? We'd like to talk with him.
He's not available.
He is in, but he's not available.
He's not here in the office.
Well, she just said he was in the office.
He's not available.
Okay, so he is in, but he's not available.
He's not available. You have to.
Right, but he is in.
Fitzgerald finally agreed to talk to us, but the outspoken legislator, who has courted the media for years, refused to answer any questions.
We are going through a process now that we are confident that we're going to be exonerated. And as far as our inheritance from my friend Mary, we know that it was not only lawful, but ethically and morally correct.
If he spent any time with Mary, as he claimed he did, he certainly would have seen her outstanding needs, would have seen her dirty clothing, would have seen that she was in need of a coat and was psychologically unbalanced in many ways. If you had eyes, you would have seen that. And from what I've seen, Kevin Fitzgerald does have eyes, although perhaps not for Mary, just for Mary's money.
Fitzgerald initially said Mary's money went to pay medical bills for his dying mother. He later admitted that it was used to buy into this vacation home on Martha's Vineyard. One of the most upsetting things about all of this, to the few family members and friends that Mary left behind, is that despite a $500,000 estate, those who got the money didn't even bother to purchase a tombstone. Mary was buried on top of her mother, and her grave remains unmarked.
After doing some research, I was convinced that she was my cousin.
In December of 1985, John Guzelian of Glendale, California, visited Mary's grave. He had a picture of Mary as a youth. He says he knew nothing nor cared nothing about Mary's wealth. He was merely trying to trace his family tree. Cemetery personnel directed him to Muse and Fitzgerald, but he says despite dozens of letters, telegrams, and telephone calls, Fitzgerald refused to see him, and Muse gave him the runaround for 6 years.
I had not even once told them I'm challenging the will.
A friend of Mary says she told him that whatever she left in the world, she wanted to go to the Paulist Fathers, an order of Catholic priests who run a homeless drop-in center a half block from the Massachusetts State House, a half block from Kevin Fitzgerald's office, where everything Mary had ended up.
This person seems like a scoundrel, an absolute out-and-out scoundrel. And I hope that he comes to justice.
A federal grand jury and a state ethics committee are now investigating. Coming next, Boston's new kids are making